Hello everyone, so this is part 2 of the butterfly tutorial. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'd obviously recommend you watch that first if you're going to follow along with this piece. And as usual, I'll leave the link for the reference in the description as well. So I'm just going to jump straight in, to be honest. I'm going to start with the Luminance Russet. So I'm just going to sharpen that quickly. So we have the Luminance Russet, nice and sharp. For anyone interested, the sharpener that I use, I often just use these little metal sharpeners that you can buy quite cheap. I mean, I buy them from the range and I think they're a pound, a couple of pounds, something like that. But I do also have the Swordfish Icon, which I would really recommend. It's a really nice sharpener, and you can see it gets a really nice point on your pencils. So I'm going to go in with the russet, starting on this wing here, and I'm just using a bit of a firmer pressure now compared to these first initial layers. And I'm just beginning to fill the tooth of the paper, not completely, as we've still got sort of detail to add and we've got more layers to go. So I still want some of that tooth visible. And when I say tooth of the paper, I mean sort of the little grains that we've got in the paper. So I don't want to completely fill them at this stage, because when you completely burnish the paper, it's then hard to add layers on top of that. So as I say, if you look at the reference, in the sort of orangey section of the wings, it's dark here and then it sort of fades to a lighter orange. So I'm just going to sort of darken up the edges here. And I'm also going over these lines. I think it was dark sepia that we used last time. I'm just burnishing over those as well, just to sort of push them back a little bit more so that they don't stand out quite so much. And then it's a little bit darker sort of under this line here as well. So I'm just going to burnish this a little bit more. Basil! Basil! Baz! Stop it. Now, with this sort of thing, I like to use a nice circular motion with the pencil. I say this quite often in my tutorials, but I just find, obviously it's dependent on, it's, as I say, I'm using a little bit of a lighter pressure now. And then same on the other side. Now this wing is slightly darker, so it just means that I'm going to apply a little bit more russet, and I'm going to use a little bit of a firmer pressure as well. Okay, so now I'm going to jump back in with the Polychromos Dark Cadmium Orange, and just these areas that we've sort of left, I'm going to burnish those, and then I'm also going to sort of blend into the layer of russet that we've just put down. Okay, and then jumping back in with the Luminance Russet, just down here. Now, as I said in part 1, there's almost little sort of hairs in this area. So I'm just taking note of that, and when I'm drawing, I'm just making sure that I sort of go in the direction of those little hairs. I do like to, so if I'm sort of sticking with one colour, I tend to go around the whole of the piece that I'm drawing, or just the whole of a section that I'm focusing on, and everything that is that sort of tone and colour, I'll try and match up as I go along. I just find that it's a much more efficient way of putting pencil onto paper. And also it just helps you to really balance out the tones and make sure that you're sort of matching the tones and matching the colours together, because that is where the realism is, and that's what's gonna sort of, having those tones matching up correctly is what's going to make your piece look really lovely and realistic. So now let's go in with Luminance Raw Umber. And we're just going to begin to really sort of add some of that detail now. So I'm going to start down here, and we've already gone in with the dark, I think it was the dark sepia, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure it could have been the walnut brown, but I think all of this is dark sepia. And I'm going to sort of burnish over that, and then also just glaze over the areas that's just the plain white paper. So I'm using a fairly hard pressure when I'm going over these dark sepia areas, but everywhere else just a nice soft light pressure. So I'm going to go in with a Polychromos black now, and I'm going to just really burnish the darkest areas. So I'm just going to start down here on this little sort of circular shape, and now these details are quite sort of sharp and in focus, so that's why I want a nice sharp pencil. And I'm really using a hard pressure to really burnish now and just fill in the tooth of the paper. Then there's little sort of dots here that I'm going to add. I want to really sharpen up and darken these edges here. So again, a nice sharp pencil. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with the Pablo Fast Orange, just to get those little sort of yellowy orange details in there. So I'm using a hard pressure now and really burnishing. Not in the middle, just sort of on the edges. And then that yellow also sort of comes down into the wings as well. Okay, and then there's also, I'm just going to add a little bit here as well, and then same on the other side, and then I might even just burnish a little bit here. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with, I found a really lovely colour for the almost sort of purpley blue in the little sort of circles here. So let me just sharpen it. I'm to go in with the Pablo again, actually, the Pablo Mauve, I think it's Mauve. I'll show you it there. I might not be saying it right, I think it's Mauve. And I'm just going to, now I don't want to use a really hard pressure here because I've still got quite a few layers to go in these areas because I want to add some blue as well. So quite a light pressure, and I'm just using a circular motion with my pencil and just filling that in there. And then I'm going to go over sort of half of that from this black line on the edge here. I'm going to go about halfway up between the line and the circle with the Polychromos Ultramarine. I want to just work on the body in the middle a little bit more. So, and I want to darken up quite a few of the areas. So I'm going to go in with the Polychromos Dark Indigo again, and I'm just picking out the very darkest areas of the body. So there's almost a bit of a sort of rectangular shape here. And then the head as well. It's a really tiny head, but there's quite a lot of little details and texture. So I'm just sort of mapping that in. So I'm also just going to go in with the Pablo Malachite Green. There's also a Luminance Malachite Green, which is similar, but I'm gonna go for the Pablo and just glaze over this section here. And down here as well. because I think it's really starting to take shape now. I'm going to go in with the electric eraser actually, just to add back in these little sort of dots that we completely sort of burnished over at the start. I just find that if you just completely sort of burnish the area and then erase it with the electric eraser, it just looks a little bit more sort of natural and a little bit more subtle than if you was to sort of draw around each circle. It's just a more efficient way of doing it as well. I just find that with the electric eraser you get sort of a bit of a softer blend on it, which is why I prefer to sort of just colour over the area and then erase the details after. So I'm just going to add these little dots back in. I'm just going to jump in with the Polychromos Caput Mortem Violet, and I'm just going to add these little lines in. Now they're almost in sort of little dots, so I'm just going to sort of sketch them in, and then I want to add some of these dots around the outside of the little sort of circle as well, just sort of adding the detail. Now there's little sort of almost little lines on the edge here, so I'm just going in with the Caput Mortem Violet and just sort of sketching those in. Before I go back in with the black pencil, I'm going to go in with the Luminance French Grey 10%, and basically any areas now that are the paper, I'm just going to burnish with this. I don't really want any of the paper visible. Okay, and then back in with the Luminance Raw Umber, and I'm just sort of adding any extra detail in that's on the edge here. Okay, and then straight in with the Polychromos Dark Sepia. And I'm just adding the darkest details to the body in the middle here. And then I'm just going to burnish these out a little bit more with the Luminance Russet. I'm now going to go in with a really light orange. I'm going to use the Luminance Apricot. And I'm just going to go light over dark, because as I say, you can go light over dark on the Fabriano. Again, sketching in those little hairs, so those lighter details, you can see how nicely that is going on. Then I'm also going to add some of that up here as well. So I'm going to jump in with the electric eraser to just add, there's lots of little sort of dots around the edge of the body, and I just want to add those in, and also just lighten up any areas that need it. Okay, and then now I want to jump back in with the black pencil, the black Polychromos I'm using, and I'm just going to add all the little sort of dots and the nice little details here. So I'm using quite a hard pressure. And then I'm just going to glaze over these little sections here with the Pablo Fast Orange. And then I'm going to glaze a little bit here as well, I think. Okay, so I'm going to go in with the Pablo White and then just burnish the lightest areas. So around these little sort of circles at the bottom. Okay, and there we go. So I think I'm going to leave part 2 there. Now that the butterfly's pretty much finished, I mean, I'll probably end up dipping back into it as I'm working on the background. I might not, but I think I probably will. So in part 3, we're going to be working on the background. Now we might not get it all finished in part 3, there could potentially be a part 4. But so we've got the flower that's sort of out of focus in the background, and then all this lovely out of focus sort of colours and shapes here. Now it looks quite confusing, but I'm going to show you how to sort of lightly map it in and break it down to get that really nice sort of blurred effect. So yeah, I'm going to leave part 2 there, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you in part 3.